Movies based on video games. They're terrible. In fact, I can't even think of a decent movie based on a video game. And if you want to argue with me about it, come at me. And if you're going to say Resident Evil, those movies were mediocre at best. So if that's all you've got, I've already won.
Now whilst that may be true, the likes of Aladdin, GoldenEye, Spider-Man 2 all prove that games based on movies can be a wonderful thing.
Actually, he makes a bloody good point. In fact, some developers take it that one step further. And instead of just basing a game on a movie, they take that movie and base the game in that same filmed universe with its own standalone story. Now that is a wonderful thing.
I like what you did there, Jason. I like that a lot. It's nice to hear we're both playing from the same cartridge. But now, without any further ado, please sit back, relax, enjoy our top 10 list of the best games to be based on those movies that we know and love. Enjoy. Our first entry is Eraser Turnaround. Derived from one of Arnie's last efforts before he governated us. You know, the movie where he goes apeshit at the end with those railguns. The game is a pretty hectic shooting gallery romp, which involves popping pesky bad guys, attempting puzzles, forging your own path through enemy terrain, and sitting through reels and reels and reels of daft cutscenes. Ah, the 90s. Those that have been underwhelmed by previous Lord of the Rings titles, Conquest, we're looking at you, were pleasantly surprised when Shadow of Mordor marched onto consoles in 2014. Stepping into the boots of Ghost Goody Talion, the game is really an excuse to parkour your way across Mordor using a mix of stealth and brute Havoc engine driven fight moves to reach your goal. Standing in your way is an army of Sauron's minions, all of whom sound like a Hackney cab driver. Also introducing a gaming first in the Nemesis system, a little AI miracle that lets you develop genuine beefs with certain orcs and uraks, Shadow of Mordor is this list's most innovative game by a Mirkwood mile. Next up is Trespasser. Billed as a spiritual sequel to The Lost World, this 90s oddity is now better known for getting an absolute mauling from critics at the time of its release, most of which who cited the game's unique mechanics and spec-busting graphics as being a little bit of a problem. But in latter years, a lot of love's been shown for the game, with forums and websites being raised in its honour, and hey, even though it's nigh on impossible to take down a Brontosaurus armed with an Uzi in that weird wiggly arm mechanic, it's a whole lot of fun. What's worse, playing this or sitting through Jurassic Park 3, or to a latter extent, The Lost World?
Now, to prove to you that we're not just the same as all the other top 10 lists on YouTube, we brought you some information direct from Richard Wyckoff, who was the lead designer on Trespasser, and after several harassing emails succumbed to the pressure and sent us over this little nugget of information.
Now Richard said that along with the game being an absolute joy to work on, it wasn't without its problems and challenges. It was actually an absolute behemoth just to get onto a disc. There were 25,000 objects in Trespasser, hence the way the problems came about, and probably why it broke a few PCs in its time. Following on from this, Richard doesn't think the game deserves a lot of the negative press that it got, and in a way we're both inclined to agree, being lovers of the game. However, he thinks that accolade should actually go on to Big Rig's over-the-road racer, and in a way you can't help but agree with him.
Ghostbusters the video game is a game that doesn't get the love it deserves. It's essentially the sequel to the movies that the fans have been crying out for years. Not only did the game feature the likeness of the actors from the original movies, the actors themselves came back to reprise their roles and voice the parts. And further to that, Dan Aykroyd and the late Howard Ramis even assisted in writing the script. The game featured slick third-person combat which allowed you to don the proton pack and live out your childhood dreams. You even get your hands on the PK meter, which helps you find the ghosts, which are normally hidden around the room. Once you find them, you get to batter them into submission and then catch them with the trap, just like in the movies. The game is littered with fan service, and you find yourself travelling to many locations from the film and meeting many characters as well, such as Slimer and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And of course, it wouldn't be Ghostbusters without the iconic Ray Parker Jr. soundtrack. Who you gonna call? Alien vs Predator is an awesome concept. In fact, it's a concept so awesome, it's spawned countless comics and books over the years. And even Actually, I'm not going to talk about movies, the movies were terrible, but the games were good. More specifically, the 1999 PC game aptly named Alien vs Predator. The first-person shooter allowed you to take on 3 characters, either the Predator, the Alien, or a human. As the Predator, you were granted access to an arsenal of awesome weapons, including the wrist blade, shoulder cannon, spear, and throwing disc, which allowed you to decapitate your enemies at will. Playing as the alien was a different beast entirely, no pun intended. You were able to scale the walls, you were faster than the other characters, and you were able to pull off sweet kills using your claws, your tail, and your inner mouth. Now you ask yourself, why would you want to be human in this situation? Well actually, you're not just a human, you're one of the colonial marines from the Aliens movie, and you get access to the pulse rifle, smart gun, and minigun, which enabled you to tear through the aliens at will. Well, apart from when you came across the Queen Alien. Because what did that mean, Bill Paxton?
Game over, man! It's game over!
That's right, Bill. Game over.
In this Star Wars expanded universe adventure, you play as Jedi turned mercenary Kyle Katarn, a man on a mission to put a blaster-sized hole in the Empire. The game was famed for building on predecessor Dark Forces 2, both in story and gameplay, with a real focus on first-person lightsaber action and shooting. Despite boasting perhaps the worst third-person viewpoint in gaming history, don't worry, it was optional, the game was a major hit when released in 2002 and spawned a sequel in Jedi Academy, which although good, was not a patch on this. So, is this the best Star Wars game ever? By Jove, it's up there.
After playing Outcast, we caught up with Chad Boardwell, who was an artist on the game, and he had this little bit of golden information to share with us.
Chad was a guarded old sausage. What we did manage to get out of him was that the game itself was based on a paper and pen Star Wars role-playing game, all very nerdy. And what he did say was all the planets you see throughout the hack and slash adventures are not canon. They are based on the designers of the game and their names derive from them. So that was what we got from Chad.
In 1997, Westwood Studios took on a challenge of making a game based on the 1980s classic Blade Runner. Featuring a brand new protagonist, Ray McCoy, the game's story ran parallel to the movie plot, and even overlapping it several times through the game. While it was essentially a point-and-click adventure game, in Blade Runner you had the ability to shoot enemies. Clicking the right mouse button would bring up a reticle that you aimed over the enemies and pressed the left button to shoot, which came in handy when trying to take down those skin jobs. The game's story also progressed in real time, meaning depending on how you played the game, certain aspects of the story might happen, might not happen, or might happen in a different order. This also had an impact on the climax of the game, with the game being one of the very first to try multiple endings depending on what choices you made through the game. Which ironically is a lot like the movie, where depending on which version you watch, you get a different ending every time. Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis was a 1992 point-and-click adventure game by LucasArts. Eager to follow up on the success of the Monkey Island series, LucasArts decided to try their hand again in the adventure point-and-click genre, but this time utilising the Indiana Jones license. The game's plot follows Indiana Jones as he searches for the legendary city of Atlantis, while those pesky Nazis try to stop him along the way. The gameplay was very familiar to those of the Monkey Island series, and the game won several awards for the Adventure Game of the Year. A sequel was originally planned, but unfortunately after multiple cancellations, it was scrapped indefinitely. But with the point-and-click adventure making a resurgence on touchscreen devices, fans of the game live in hope that the sequel may still see the light of day.
We all had that mate with a copy of Robocop vs Terminator. We tell our mothers we were heading out to play Bubsy, when in reality we were going around said mate's house, getting our gore on. Torn from the pages of Frank Miller's 4-issue run of comics, the premise was pretty simple with this one. You are Robocop. Enlisted to take on Skynet's finest fleet of Terminators, it's really just an excuse to puncture punks in the street like bloody water balloons, cause explosions, and, in later levels, engage in explosive robot-on-robot action. Saucy.
Eager scamps that we are, we've managed to snag yet another interview, this time with Tim Williams, who back in the day used to work for Virgin Interactive and was the lead designer on Robocop vs Terminator. Jason here is going to run through the kind of things that we managed to extract from his head.
Now, despite the fact that Tim had to set his mind back over 20 years to try and recall some of this information, what he was able to tell us was the game garnered so much controversy at the time that it even got a mention on the Jay Leno show, which was a big deal at the time. And Tim was even the guy who had to sit Richard Branson down and give him a run through of the game, and he was a bit worried that Richard Branson would think the game was a little bit too violent. But actually Richard Branson just sat there going, yes, excellent, excellent, excellent. But the reality was, he probably didn't have a clue what was going on. Now I know what you're thinking, we've already had a Star Wars game on this list. But the thing is, we love Star Wars, and it's our list, and we can do what we want. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic was first released for the original Xbox in 2003, and it was released shortly afterwards on the PC as well. The story takes place 4,000 years before the events of the Phantom Menace, which is a good move by the developers, because let's be honest, you're going to want to create as much distance from that movie as you can, so 4,000 years seems about right. The game was developed by BioWare, who have since gone on to become famous for their own video game space opera. But unlike Mass Effect, which was a third-person shooter, Knights of the Old Republic had a more strategic type combat, more reminiscent of the Dragon Age series. Knights of the Old Republic also featured one of the greatest plot twists in gaming history, and in case you haven't played it yet, here's a spoiler for you. The bad guy that you've been chasing all the way through the game, well, turns out it was you all along. Who knew?